Hey everyone, welcome back to the Always Closing podcast. Today we have a very interesting topic because we wanted to put together a lot of the issues that we see people run into and things that can delay the escrow process. So in this video, what we wanted to do is name the top 10 most common things that cause delays in escrow. And we're going to kind of go in order from most common to stuff that we see less often but still do cause problems. Nothing that we can't overcome, but definitely if you're looking to close escrow in 10 days or for everything to go stress-free, you might want to know about these issues. So I have my mother Liz, president of Westlake Escrow, again with us today.
Hello.
So welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you.
So let's get right into it. First things first, probably the thing that we see most often, right?
Yes.
Is the SI. Now, this is important document, the statement of information that you're going to want to get filled out and get it back to us as soon as possible. So why don't you explain a little bit more about that?
Yes. What I suggest to agents, listing agents, is to, when they go get the listing agreement signed, to also have a statement of information completed by the seller. This way we submit it to title, we get clearance, and we know what we're up against. Whether there's liens, judgments, and if there are any that come up against the seller or the property and they don't belong to our seller, then we can weed them out and get a clean prelim, and we know what we need to do right up front. So there is no delays.
So let's say somebody that's not in the industry with us, right, or someone maybe buying their first home. What is a statement of information? What information do they put on there? And how does that help us?
Great question. The statement of information is a statement with all the client's personal information, such as date of birth, social security, and even though most titles require the seller, to get clearance on the seller, the buyer is also important that title clears that, because sometimes the lender wants to see that the buyer is clear, that there's no judgments against the buyer. That is why we try to get the escrow instructions out right away, and we ask that the SI is completed so we can get the seller and the buyer statement of information clear, and we're good to go.
Awesome. Okay. So number 2 is if the buyer or seller is out of the country. And sometimes this happens if people are in the armed forces. If they're stationed out of the country, that can also cause delays. So how can we avoid that?
Okay.
Well, we can't avoid them being out of the country, but how do we avoid the delay from that?
2 ways to get this done. Recently, they came up with virtual notaries, which we can assign a notary, and there's a special notary. Not every notary can do it. They have to be approved. So the notary, we send the documents to the signer, mm-hmm. and the notary gets them on camera, and like FaceTime type of thing, and
or like a Zoom meeting sort of?
Yeah, like a Zoom meeting, okay. And then they notarize the documents that way. And then we send them out a FedEx ticket for the original documents to come back. Some title companies, they'll just take an electronic signature. Just depends on the title, I believe. And then the other way is for the seller to go to the American consulate, and they have a notary there. That's the only way they can do it. I mean, the only notary that can be used within, yes, a notary within the U.S. consulate. So those 2 ways. And we need to get that done as soon as possible, because sometimes, because it's an international package, it could take a while. And if there's any discrepancies or anything, we can take care of it right away.
So that's something that definitely someone would want to say ahead of time, right? Like I'm planning on being out of the country on these days, or maybe I'm planning to be stationed over here on these days. Mm-hmm. Something that you definitely want to talk to your agent with and communicate with escrow title and let us know that that's happening, so we can pre-plan these sort of things so it doesn't cause any major delays.
Correct.
Number 3 is going to be solar. So if you have solar on your house or you're buying a home with solar, we're going to have to take care of that a couple different ways. So let's hear about solar. How can
Yes, the agent needs to let escrow know when opening escrow if the solar is going to be transferred to the buyer or if it's going to be paid off. Either way, we need to approach the solar company right away, because there are another ones that can take another 20 days or more sometimes, because if there's going to be transfer to the buyer, the seller needs to sign documents, the buyer needs to sign documents, and then the solar company runs a credit to the buyer. And they can't do that unless both sign. And then there is like a 24-hour link that it's only good for 24 hours, so they both have to sign within 24 hours. And once they sign those documents, then the solar company prepares the documents once they have checked the credit and everything, it's okay. So, and solar companies sometimes are very difficult to get a hold of, or they don't answer, as quickly as we need to. And so that's why we need to know right away so we can approach them and try to get the documents organized.
And we're seeing this much more common now, right? Because more homes especially
built.
New homes are being built with solar.
Yes.
Or people are adding solar to their homes. So this is becoming more common
Yes.
as time goes on. Okay, so continuing, we're going to go to number 4, special reports. So some cities or counties, maybe even, will require a special type of report. For example, the city of LA has the 9A report. So how has that caused delays in the past with a 9A report?
Sometimes if we don't have all the signatures required, so there's a form that the seller, the buyer, or an approved plumber or contractor needs to sign. For example, they ask how many toilets, there's smoke detectors, etc. That form needs to be completed. It needs to be submitted to the city of Los Angeles with a fee. So we either will need a check or a credit card to order the report, and the city can take up to 20 days. So if you have a all cash transaction and you want to do a 10-day escrow, that's not going to happen if the buyer requires the 9A report. One way to go around it is for the buyer and seller to agree not to provide one.
To waive it, basically?
To waive it. And so in that case, we prepare an amendment stating that the buyer and seller both agree to close escrow without the 9A report.
And then moving on to number 5, an uninsured deed affidavit. So tell us about that. Tell us how to avoid any issues in those situations.
Okay. That is when a grantor, meaning the owner of the property, grants to another person the property with a grant deed that there was no escrow or title involved. That makes the grant deed an uninsured deed. So in order for title to close on if there is an uninsured deed in between this transaction, we need the grantor to sign an affidavit stating that he or she willingly signed off the property to the grantee. That affidavit needs to be signed and notarized with a different notary that notarized that grant deed. And if that affidavit is not provided to title will not close. So it's very important that if there is an uninsured deed, an uninsured grant deed, that the seller or the grantor knows that we can get a hold of that person that signed that deed. And sometimes it's hard because they break relationships, or if that person died, which could be, then in that case, just the title requires an affidavit of death and a death certificate.
Have you seen anything like this recently that you've worked on?
As a matter of fact, I'm working on one right now. There's all kinds of deeds that need to be prepared because the owners prepare grant deeds themselves. The vestings are incorrect. They put social security numbers on the grant deed, which is not required. Then they deed it from them as husband and wife to trust, and one trustee only signed the grant deed, and then they prepare another trust, and then the other trustee signed that other deed, which it's not acceptable because both trustees of the trust need to sign the grant deed. And then those people signed to another person. So there is like 6 grant deeds that we need to prepare to correct title. So it gets
So maybe as a side note, let's say maybe you shouldn't be preparing your own.
No, we suggest that you don't. There is services that if you don't have an escrow open, there is service companies that will prepare that, obviously for a fee, and record those. But definitely do yourself a favor. Do not prepare grant deeds or trusts at home.
Okay. So speaking of, moving on to the next one, actually, this is going to be number 6. And these are old deed of trust, right? So these are maybe homes that were purchased a long time ago. Maybe they're paid off. How have you seen that delay the escrow process?
If there is a really old grant deed and,
Like
deed of trust.
Huh? How old are we talking here?
Sometimes we have seen as old as 40 years.
Okay.
And so the owner had paid off that loan, but the lender never never recorded a reconveyance. Now we have to get a zero balance demand, and we need to get a reconveyance to record to clear title, and we can't find the lender.
Yeah,
it could have been
a
a private lender, it could have been an institutional lender, but it's no longer in business, and they sell their loans to other companies, and nobody can find it. I had a situation where we couldn't close escrow because we couldn't find the lender, and the title then required a bond, but the bond was very expensive, and this was just a refinance. But either way, there is that issue sometimes, and we just couldn't close.
So is there really a way to avoid this, or a way to kind of help in the situation, or is this something that's just kind of unfortunate that causes, this issue?
It is unfortunate because, again, if we cannot provide title with evidence that deed of trust was paid off, most likely it's not going to close because title ensures a transaction and they need to deliver clear title to the buyer.
That's interesting.
And the lender also wants that out of the way. If it's a refinance, they want to be in first position, so they don't want that deed to show up in front of them. So the lender is not going to go for that.
Well, if anybody watching this has encountered this situation and maybe knows of some kind of way to go around this in some way, let us know in the comments or send us a message, because I'm interested to know.
Yeah, we welcome any suggestions, any knowledge that help us close escrows.
Number 7, and this is something I feel like is also pretty common, and that's tenant issues. So if you have a property or you're purchasing a property that has tenants, sometimes they're cooperative, sometimes they're not, but there's definitely tenant issues that arise, and we've seen those type of issues delay escrow as well, right?
Yes, I had one that was open for 6 months and we couldn't close because it was 3 units, but the one tenant in the back would not get out and did not vacate the property. They would not let nobody go in to see the property. They had to evict them, and the eviction process could take a while, and they know that. So they sit on it, don't pay rent, don't vacate the place, and the buyer demands that the property gets delivered if it was not agreed upon signing the contract, that they need the place vacant. So we cannot close until that property has been vacant.
Right. So this is something that I would say maybe you want to just definitely, if you're purchasing a property that has tenants, you definitely want to kind of make sure you speak to the seller and kind of get an idea. I would imagine you would want to know what type of tenants you have. Mm-hmm. Do they pay on time? Do they are they cooperative? If they were selling the property, are they letting people come in and take photos and helping them sell, or are they just blocking people out?
Lock the gates and don't let nobody in.
People do all kinds of stuff, and people will just squat on the property, like you said. Stop paying, just stay there, won't get out. I had a friend that he purchased the property the same way, and the people would not leave for like a year. And I think he even said that at one point there was no electricity, no water, and this is up in the mountains where it gets cold. And
wow.
then they even had to call Child Protective Services because there was a small kid living there. And I'm like,
God,
how are they
that was-
living in the cold and
That
the
became
snow
a health issue.
with no electricity, no water? So it could be a headache. So definitely, tenant issues is one to look out for. Make sure you kind of know what the tenants are.
And
or how
sometimes
they are
tenants
if you're
push
buying
for
from-
that because they want money. You know, they want the seller to offer them money to get out.
Right.
So that's what it's. If it's going to be cheaper in the long run, I say yeah, pay them whatever, just to get them to leave and be able to close escrow.
Right. The next one is HOAs. And this one I remember when I was purchasing my property, we even had an issue with my HOA because of some kind of lawsuit that was going on. So I guess that could be a little side issue, but tell us how HOAs can delay the process.
Again, if it's a very short escrow, like 10 days, for example, or sometimes 7 days, and some HOA companies can take up to 10 business days unless you pay a rush fee, and the fees are already high sometimes, and then if you have to add a rush fee, the seller is not very happy. And then recently, we've had 2 transactions where there is called a proprietary tax or fee, I'm sorry, and that's like on top of the transfer fee. This is like another transfer fee, but it's very high. It's a high percentage of the sales price. And
We had one the other day that was like
yes,
over
it was
$9,000.
9,300. So sometimes the people don't know that they have that, or they fail to let the agent know. And when we go to close and we find out that there's this fee, and now they're $10,000 short than what the seller thought they were getting, and if they're using that money to buy another property qualify, then there's an issue there. So please, I suggest that when you talk to your clients, ask them, are you aware that there is a proprietary fee, transfer fee? And if so, let us know. Give us the information right away. Also, our notaries are very well trained to ask questions like that as well, just in case the agents forget to ask that. Our notary is very, very professional, very knowledgeable and stuff like that. So we also try to get that information out of the seller to help the agent out.
Number 9 is seller credits. So this is something that's going to want to be disclosed to us early in the process so we can account for those credits. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, and a lot of times it's on the purchase contract, but sometimes these credits come later. So as soon as the agents know that there
This
is
is for like repairs, maybe things like that, right?
Yes. Then let us know, because we also have to disclose that to the lender. The lenders, a lot of times they need to disclose within 3 days of opening escrow. So they need to know all these fees, just such as TC fees, if we're paying off people, creditors. If there's going to be seller credit or even agent credit to the buyer, let us know right away so we can alert the lender that there's these credits and they approve them. Because sometimes the lenders don't approve such credits. And sometimes they have disclosed and they didn't know about this, and then it's too late into the transaction to approve those credits. So that is something that we need to know as soon as possible. Sometimes escrow is forgotten and they don't let us know. They agree between agents, sellers, and buyers, and they forget to let escrow know or the lender, and then this come up at the end, and that could be an issue with a lender.
You have to recalculate everything,
right,
move all the numbers around to make it make sense. Okay.
Right.
Well, we got to the last one, and this one we've seen this become an issue that can really delay time, right, is probates. So tell us what that is, how has that delayed the process, and how can we avoid those issues?
Okay, a property goes on probate if the owner dies and there's no trust in the property. So it goes through an attorney, goes through the courts, and that could be very lengthy and costly. So
because then it's in their hands to decide who gets the property, correct?
Right. Because it goes pretty much to the state, and then that's why it has to go to court, and then they tell us. I mean, they tell the attorney how it needs to be done. Who are the there has to be a appoint an administrator, and then there has to be an account, a bank account that, or the final proceeds go to the attorney, and then the attorney disperses the proceeds. So that is something that also needs to be disclosed right away to escrow, and let us know that this is going to be a probate transaction, so we know how, and we need the attorney's information and who the administrator is. Administrator is going to sign the purchase contract anyway, so we'll know that information, but we also need the attorney contact so we can get letters of admin, all the documents that title requires.
Okay. So that wraps up 10, but we do have a bonus. There's one that we thought about a little while ago that is probably not as common as this, but we are seeing a little bit more of it right now just because of the way the market is. There's not a lot of buying and selling unless somebody has to sell, and in this case, the bonus is divorces. So how does that affect the escrow process, and how have you seen that cause delays?
The delay I could see sometimes is that the husband or ex-husband and ex-wife don't agree on some stuff, and they will not sign documents. Usually, if we get a divorce decree and it's spelled out who gets what,
then it makes it easier.
It makes it easier. But sometimes they don't communicate with each other, they don't like each other, and then we are put in the middle.
They don't talk to each other.
Yeah, we have to talk to each other and listen to their stories sometimes, and just to get them to do what they need to do in order to close. So because sometimes they're bitter in that relationship, they just want to make it difficult for one another, and we're caught in the middle trying to get them to agree to do what they need to do to close our escrow transaction. And of course they don't tell my ex-wife where I live, or don't tell my husband where I live. And so we just have to be very careful with those situations and just take it as it comes. And like I said, we have a due diligence to do, and we keep that privacy for each party.
Well, that's our job, right? Is to be a neutral party.
Absolutely.
Keep privacy. So those situations make it a little bit more difficult, or we kind of get stuck in the middle, but that's what we're here for.
I call it challengeable. And the more challenges I come across, the better escrow officer that I become.
That's great. Well, I hope that, I know there was a lot of information in this episode, but I hope it's helpful for agents or anybody buying or selling to kind of keep this information handy, because I think it's things that can cause escrow to delay, and of course everybody wants those smooth escrow transactions. So these are the most common ones that we see, so keep them in mind. And
if there's any other questions that we left out, we call us, and if we don't have the answer, we'll find it, for you. So just feel free to call us anytime. Like I said, if we don't have the answer, we'll find it for you.
Definitely. Well, thanks again for tuning into the Always Closing podcast. I hope this one was helpful, and be sure to like and subscribe to our page, because that helps us do more videos. So we'll see you on the next one, and thanks for watching.
See you soon.